Immaculate is one of the surprise horror hits of the year. It's got rising star Sydney Sweeney, and just about everyone who saw it encouraged others to do so. Well, maybe except the Catholic Church. I'm being especially careful of spoilers here, so let's dive into some modern nunsploitation. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me today is Tim.
Ciao.
Arrivederci. I mean, I should have saved that for the end of the show, I suppose. But yes, welcome everyone. We're not doing an Italian movie today, but we are doing a movie set in Italy, and that is Immaculate, which was a release earlier this year, starring Sydney Sweeney, and we're going to finally get to it today. So we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. You can also get bonus content if you want to help support the show, but I'll tell you more about that and Patreon at the end of the episode. So I heard some buzz about Immaculate back in like March, April, whenever it came out, and did not look into what it was, right? I saw the poster, I knew it was Sydney Sweeney, I knew that she was in like a nun outfit, but other than that, I didn't know anything. So I went into this not even knowing what was sort of subgenre it was going into. I think I kind of assumed exorcism, just based on the imagery and the poster. But obviously, that's not exactly what it is. I'll save a lot of what it is for spoilers, but it did certainly end up being other things. I mean, the basic premise at the start of the movie is just that Sydney Sweeney's character, Sister Celia, has travelled to Italy to join a convent that specialises in looking after older nuns who are sort of in their retirement age, and they need medical care, and they're going to pass away soon. And that's what the purpose of this convent is. But something sinister may be afoot, and I feel like I can't say anything else other than that.
Yeah, probably best to...
Yeah.
Creepy church stuff, that's about the gist of it.
That's the subgenre for this one, is it? Yeah. Creepy church stuff. Were you excited to watch this one?
Oh yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this for a while. This is one of those annoying ones that, for whatever reason... we technically could have watched it earlier, but it seemed like it had been taking forever to get to like a streaming service, which, I mean, if we need to dish out the money, we could have, but but we had lots of other stuff to catch up on. So I was excited when I saw that it was on Hulu. We could, finally, get it on there. And that, similar to you, I really didn't know much other than the very basic premise. But like you said, it's one that I've been hearing a lot of buzz about. Seems to be one that people were pretty high on and recommending from the start of the year. So yeah, I was definitely excited to check it out.
Yeah, like I say, just general buzz is all I really heard. There wasn't anything specific, really. I didn't know. Yeah, I just didn't have any expectations, other than the hope that it was good. Like, that was it. That was really all I had going in. So,
that your girl's in it.
My girl. I feel it was a punchline.
Number one.
I feel there's a punchline coming here where you're not even talking about Sydney Sweeney. You're talking about Dora Romano, who plays Mother Superior.
Well, of course, everyone knows you consider yourself a Dora explorer.
Why'd you have to make this weird? And also for the audio listeners, I did have to look at the IMDb page and pick a name there. I didn't just know her name off the top of my head. Of course you did. Oh yeah, because I recognised a single actor in this who wasn't Sydney Sweeney. Let's face it, the last thing I saw Sydney Sweeney in didn't exactly leave a lot of good memories.
What? I mean, that's fine. She's only hitting bangers for this year.
Yes, I'm referring, of course, to Madame Web, which Tim actually guested on the X-Reels on Patreon for that. So you can dive into that mammoth 2.5 hour discussion over there if you want to.
I mean, my thing is pretty much just, I guess I'm the guy that hops on for Sydney Sweeney episodes.
I mean, that might mean something if you weren't on the other 600 or almost 600 episodes of this show, Tim. Which occurred to me, actually, the one episode of this show that you weren't on, I think there's only one. Way near the start of the show, which means we have to do it again at some point so Tim can talk about it, and that is The Visit.
Oh, no. I'm not in a rush to do that.
I knew that'd show you up. All right, Tim, what did you think? What was your general feelings on Immaculate?
I'd say I like it, but I mean, I don't think it's amazing or anything, and I don't know if maybe it's a little victim of being hyped up a bit too much. I don't want to sound like I'm negative. Like, I don't think the movie was horrible. I enjoyed watching it. I think it's maybe a bit uneven. I don't think it left much of an impression on me at the start. Like, I was like, okay, this is okay, but then I kind of thought, like, I was like, is this going to be like a, Conjuring ripoff or something? And I mean, no offense to anyone involved, but the last Nun movie that we saw, didn't leave a very good taste in I think anyone's mouth. But then I kind of liked where it went in the middle, and I thought it set up some good, interesting ideas. And then I don't know, I do think the ending's kind of cool, but it does seem like it was a little unexpected. Where it went, it was maybe it seemed like there's a bit of a tone shift, but I don't know. I don't want to complain too much because I did kind of think the ending was cool, but I don't know. Overall, I'm maybe a bit more lukewarm than most people. I don't know. I don't want to sound negative. I don't think it's bad, but I kind of just was like, oh, okay, that was fine after watching it.
Yeah, it was an interesting watch in a lot of ways because as the movie was starting, I kind of agree that the opening, like, half hour or whatever it is, I was like, this seems like fine, but like it's not doing anything to stand out either. Like, I'm not like seeing anything that's sparking my creative interest or any like horror moments or whatever, because the opening half hour by and large is your very typical, regardless of where it's going and what subgenre it's going to kind of settle into once it gets to its premise. The opening sort of mystery of like, okay, clearly there's something else going on here. It's not just the happy convent. There's some danger afoot in some capacity. What is it? Is it supernatural? Is it there's secretly a cult? Is it that there's a monster loose on the grounds? Is it that there's this, that, a possession? Like, it could have went in any direction.
A little boy living in the walls.
I shudder to think. Right, but like as it was doing all this early stuff where there clearly was something to unearth, right, I wouldn't say I was that interested in the mystery part. I was kind of like, you know what, I'm kind of just ready for this to just get to what it's going to be, and then maybe I'll get into it a bit more. And it did. There's literally a moment about half an hour in where suddenly it's clear what a big part of the premise is going to be, and it gets a lot more interesting as soon as that hits. And it does have some like sort of dry spells where, and again, maybe it's just because I wasn't interested in the sort of the mystery of like, oh, something's up here and we're just going to slowly tease it,
right,
for whatever reason. But I will say that the last like 20-30 minutes is very entertaining, and well, I can kind of get the complaint that it's a bit of a tone shift. It's also the most I was into the movie the entire time.
That's fair.
Because it felt like all of a sudden it had character, where like before it wasn't doing like a bad job. It was definitely better than, like you mentioned, the Nun 2. It was like every minute of this is better than the Nun 2, right? No question. But when it gets
it's not a painful watch by any means.
No. But there was definitely, some stretches where I was kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm just sort of like, I'm kind of wanting to check the phone a little bit. I'm not completely invested in what's going on. But when it got to the last like 20, 25 minutes, it does start to feel like, oh, it's got some kind of like aspirations. It's got some personality. It's maybe not what people who went to see the movie were going to expect. And I imagine if you were into it well enough up until that point, as long as you like the turn it takes, I think you probably would come out of this really enthusiastic. By the time the credits rolled at the end, I did have a bit of a smirk in my face, and I went, okay, you know what? I kind of see more what they were going for here. And, I think, I was more into it by the end than I started, but I definitely wasn't like coming out going, oh yeah, that's like a big gem of the year kind of thing. Yeah. So.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. And I think maybe, and it hasn't been like the worst year for horror, but I don't think there's been like a ton of instant classics or anything. So maybe it might stand out if it was stand out a bit more if it was like a really bad year where.
I think that's such a weird thing for you to say at this point, because there's like several big horror movies that we've not gotten to yet. So I feel like saying,
sure,
like, oh, it's not been a bad year. I was like, yeah, but we've not done. Like, I can name half a dozen movies from the summer or like right now that might be great.
It might be, but I mean, I can't really, judge them until we see them.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying, though. You can't really judge the year for horror yet, because we've even done half the horror movies from this year that we're going to have done by the time we get to.
Yeah, but I can judge this movie and say that it would have stood out more for me if it was maybe it was a worse year where there was just no like redeeming movies or whatever. Or,
sure, okay,
tons of stinkers.
I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to give some context to that statement, because there's a lot of big things that I think has potential that we've just not done yet.
Sure, I mean, yeah, Smile 2 is coming up. I know that. That's
you're not what I meant. So. No, I meant stuff that has already come out, Tim. Don't try and put horrific words in my mouth. How dare you?
I will say though, like you're talking about the ending and everything. I think especially like that last I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes or whatever is definitely like going for something, and I was pretty surprised.
The
by some of the stuff.
The last 3 minutes, literally the last 3 minutes, is the best part of the movie.
Mm-hmm. I think that's like especially going to be like maybe ruffle some feathers, and it might be like a little shocking to some people, which is pretty interesting. That's actually something that's really interesting that I feel like you don't see in a lot of religious horror movies, where it'll do something that's because I feel like and maybe it's kind of a problem I have sometimes with religious horror is a lot of times it does end up being very like like the church is the hero, and God is great, Jesus saves you and stuff, which I mean obviously if that's your bag, that's fine or whatever, but it's not always the thing I want to see. So it's interesting to see a movie that maybe takes some different swings. I guess can't get into it too much, but I think it's also, with the last stuff going on, very timely. I think there's a very specific message to the movie that again we can get more into in spoilers, but
yeah
all that stuff makes it more of an interesting watch too.
Yeah, definitely. Like as soon as it got to its main premise, I'm like, okay, I feel like this has something to say, and I think the ending really helped give it a bit of bite, a bit of spice, whatever you want to call it. Like it gave it that potency that it left a bit of an impact right at the very end. I would be curious to watch it again down the line, and I will say it is like before the credits rolled, it was like 84 minutes. It's not a long movie. It moves at a brisk pace by and large, which maybe actually speaks more to the fact that I did even feel a little bit bored in that first half hour when it was just doing the introductions and stuff, and I don't know if it's just kicked down to the fact that I expected something based on the setting and I was just not that interested in it. So it wasn't until it started to like show how it was different, what was making it unique versus what I expected it to be, where I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit of this now, and I'm getting into this a bit more. I will say, and this is something that I don't know if people expect from this, because again, you may not even know what sort of subgenre of horror it is, but even once you know where it's going, I will say there's a few surprising moments of gore, I'll just call it, that I did not expect. It was welcome because I enjoy a good bit of gore, but so just that's something worth mentioning.
Absolutely, yeah. Like they're few and far between, but the moments like they do pop up, it was pretty surprising, but in a good way. Like I appreciated that. Yeah,
this isn't a movie that's going for lots of gore scenes. It's not a slasher movie, but when it does pop up, like it doesn't pull punches. It kind of hits hard, and it makes them feel quite visceral as a result. So worth mentioning that. Sure. Yeah, so Sydney Sweeney's the lead role. Sister Celia, she is. I think she's very good when she's just like emoting. I think she's a very good actress. I think her dialogue delivery is a bit more just okay. But when she's acting with her face and doing, shocked faces, or she's looking scared or whatever, I think she's really good at doing that. I think her line delivery is a bit more like, she always just sounds like a Hollywood actress when she's speaking, if that makes sense. Like it's hard to sort of buy her as this, timid nun who's like went off to Italy to join a convent. But when she's just performing with her expressions, I feel like I get a lot out of it. She's very emotive in that sense.
Oh yeah. I would say I definitely enjoyed her more in this than I did in,
Well, Madam Web, that's not saying much.
I mean, Madam Web does make me laugh so much, even all the wrong reasons, but it's hard to judge anyone based off that. But like, I saw that rom-com she was in, Anyone But You or whatever, and
with Chad Radwell. Yes,
Chad Radwell.
That was his character on Scream Queens, Tim.
Oh, I didn't realize that was him. Oh, cool.
What? That's all I can see when I look at him.
I mean, I like Scream Queens, but I don't know. I haven't thought about it in quite some time. That's cool though.
He'll never top that performance, but go on.
But yeah, I mean, in general, I guess I'm not, the biggest rom-com fan, and so maybe I just didn't really like that movie, but I don't know. I didn't find her particularly like great in it, but maybe it's just my taste. But no, I thought she was good in this.
I'm just laughing at you saying I'm not the biggest rom-com. Like, yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting you to be Tim.
I mean, there's some that I like. I'm not like, if a movie's good, like, I can get past genre or whatever. Sure. But yeah, I mean, we like to watch them every now and again because I feel bad sometimes with the things I have to subject my wife to. Every now and again, I'm like, hey, let's watch something that's not like super depressing or just constant buckets of blood. Even though that is what I would probably watch every day if I could.
Don't worry, everyone. We're not starting a rom-com podcast. It's not happening.
No. I mean, pay us enough, sure. When anything's on the table.
I don't know. But I think obviously with this movie, I wouldn't say that, like, there's other characters. That pop up a bit. She kind of befriends another younger nun named Sister Gwen, I want to say was her name. There's kind of the mean nun played by what's her name? Oh, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. But the character's Sister Isabel. Oh dear. And then there's sort of the main priest of Father Sal Tadeschi, who is played by Alvaro Morte. So yeah, there's a lot of Italian actors in this. They didn't fake the Italians, seemingly, just based on all these names that I'm seeing on IMDb. And accent wise, it sounded. But I mean, I'm probably not very good at judging Italian accents versus other, places in Europe.
I mean, they're no, what's his face? Russell Crowe from The Pope's Exorcist, but who is?
Oh dear. I was actually thinking early on when I thought maybe it was going to go supernatural. I was thinking, we're going to see that moped come around the corner at any point. Russell Crowe's going to come in and help save the day. Oh dear. All right. I think we can get into the spoilers then for Immaculate. You have been warned. But yeah, needless to say, I think it's worth watching if you like horror movies, which you do if you're listening to a horror movie podcast. So I guess that's a redundant statement. But I think certain fans of certain subgenres will probably get more out of it than others. But But now we get to spoilers in a second. I can actually say what that is. But so spoilers, right? Final warning. So Immaculate, and I remember actually just seeing this actually like vaguely that someone said, "Oh, it feels like a '70s horror movie in some ways." And now having seen it, I can kind of see it. And I don't know if that's just because there's a lot of Italians in it, so people are it's making them think of old Argento movies or whatever.
Sure.
But the plot of Immaculate, now that we're in spoilers, is that she immaculately conceives, right? Third day of the movie, she's sick, they test her, and they repeatedly ask her, have you had sex? Have you been up to the nasty? Have you been doing bad things? And she's like, no. And the doctor even confirms it. And it's like, oh, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. She's the second Mary. There's going to be another coming of Christ.
It's so funny because it's like, I mean, maybe I wasn't like trying too hard to think about where the movie was going. Like, I guess I was just kind of along for the ride or whatever. But once they kind of reveal like that's what it is, it's like, oh yeah, duh. Like the movie's called Immaculate. Like I should have realized like that's what it's gonna be about. Like,
well, yeah, but what's so funny though is you see Immaculate on its own. I didn't think of that either, really, because like I thought it was more like someone is immaculate, like they're perfect, right? I thought that's what it was going for. But as soon as they bring up, oh, she's conceived, I'm like, oh, immaculate conception.
Much like my conception. Okay.
Wait, as in one of your kids was immaculate, or your mother had you immaculate conceived?
Oh yeah, I'm an immaculate baby.
Is this just because you don't want to think about the fact that your mother had sex?
I mean, that could be part of it, I suppose.
I've got some bad news for you, Tim. No, so that's where it kind of takes its turn into like, okay, that's what this movie really is and whatnot. But then, of course, it turns sinister as it goes on. Not that there's no signs that there's sinister stuff happening, because there is. There's lots of glimpses of like evil-looking nuns in the background and all sorts.
If I could remember the name of the demon from Sinister, I would make a joke right now.
You don't have a chance in hell.
It was like, I want to say like Mr. Boogedy, but I know that's not it. It's like Boogedy Boo Boo.
I'll take that bet, Tim, if you want to stick to that. I'll bet you 10 grand right now that that's not the name of the demon in the Nun too.
I'll see if I can think of it before. Oh no, I'm not talking about the Nun 2. I said Sinister.
Oh, Sinister. Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that was just me not listening to you properly.
Yeah. Oh, gee, thanks.
Well, still, my statement stands though. I still think I'll bet you 10 grand that that's not the name of the demon in Sinister.
I'll see if I can think of it before the end of the show, and I'll make sure you won't see my hand.
Yes. I want to know though, so I'm checking it. Okay, I know what it is. Okay.
We'll see. See if I remember.
It's not Mr. Biggity, I'll give you that much. God, those movies were terrible. Anyway, right. So obviously when it turns a bit more sinister, it's like, oh, she's not allowed to leave, she's trapped. And this is the thing though, like halfway through the movie, there was like a moment where she like sees like a Bible passage like carved into the wall behind the painting. Mm-hmm. And she can't read it because it's in Italian, but the number's there, the 11 whatever. Mm-hmm. So she's like, oh, I can look it up in my English Bible. And she looks it up. And I actually thought it was maybe going to turn, and I'm glad it didn't actually, because it feels like it has more to say because it doesn't do this. But I thought it was going to turn out that, oh, this isn't actually the second coming of Christ. They've actually made her be the mother to the Antichrist. I thought that's where it was going to pivot to. It didn't, and I'm glad it didn't, but I thought it was going to go there.
Yeah, so that was a discussion actually. Yeah, like me and my wife were talking about because she also thought that like, that's what's happening. That's why she's so against it, and I don't know. Like I feel like there might be a way you could maybe like interpret it that way, because like the quote was something like, oh, like the Satan. Like, or like angels that appear in light may be like the devil in disguise. Like that's not the exact quote, but it's like something along those lines, which it kind of makes me wonder if like, okay, maybe even these people think they're being altruistic. Like they're not, purposefully trying to make the Antichrist, but maybe like, fate or whatever is working like behind the shadows, that it's like, that's, I don't know, coming through. I don't know, honestly, but I think I read it more like you though, where I thought like, oh no, like they are literally like trying to make the new Christ.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You could interpret it even though they don't think they're making the Antichrist, that maybe this thing will become the Antichrist because of how it was made, kind of yeah. I mean, I can see that argument for sure. I thought it was maybe going to pivot there, and I'm glad it didn't, because it felt like it had more to say by the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In particular, just this question that it poses, which is why the church were probably so upset with it, which is, was the Virgin Mary, was she like used, in a way, like,
oh sure,
was she happy that she immaculately conceived, or was she used as a tool by a man, godly or otherwise, for his purpose, and was just a piece of meat to give birth, and that's all she was? It felt like it was maybe poking at that question a little bit by the end.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I think basically what the movie boils down to is it's about like, a woman's right to choose and to have control over her body. And which is extremely prevalent like nowadays, and with so many things that are trying to people that are trying to push back against that and everything. So it makes it feel like especially relevant and.
I mean, obviously, it's a very pro-choice movie. That's absolutely what it's going for and what it's talking about. But I don't think I've ever heard someone say, and if you take the Bible as like, shoot, as in it happened, it's real, right? Which I wouldn't myself. But that's even if you are taking it as real, though, was Mary like abused by having this baby shoved into her against her choice? Like I don't know if I've ever heard that compared to, this topic.
I mean, at the very least, like even if, and I mean, I'm no Bible scholar, so I don't know. Maybe if there's other things that, say she had more of a choice like before it happened or whatever. But I mean, even if she was happy with, the pregnancy once she found out, like. It still seems like she didn't give consent, Yeah,
don't get me wrong, Tim. I'm sure 100% that after the conception that all of the stories say she was delighted with the news because it was a miracle. I'm pretty positive of that. I think this is posing the question, but all the men wrote these stories about how happy she was that she immaculately conceived. Maybe, just maybe, they're cooking the books a little bit there. They're dressing it up.
Yeah, she was so happy, and like 2 hours after she gave birth, she was doing the laundry, and what a gal.
It's this idea of control and reinforcing the the idea of what like a woman should be in the eyes of like the men in power. Because in the time period this was all supposed to happen, like things were pretty imbalanced in the equality scale. Arguably, obviously, they still are now. I'm not saying they're not, but it was even more tipped back then.
And I think it's like especially telling like when like there's like nuns and everything that are like a bit on the evil side in this movie and everything, but like the main kind of bad guys and people that seem to have the more power are like the doctor and the who's like the younger kind of priest father guy. I forget his name.
Father Tedeschi.
That's Tedeschi. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, even though it is like, a convent with lots of women and stuff, it is still mainly like the guys that are in charge and the ones that are, up to the, most of the shenanigans.
Yeah. There's a very old school hierarchy, despite the fact that most of the population of this place are women. It's like 3 or 4 men who are actually in charge of it and like making all the rules and demanding of things and whatnot. So like that is a massive theme in this movie. It's what the movie wants you to think about. Even right at the start of the film when we're first introduced to Sydney Sweeney, and she's at like the train station, I think it is, and it's like she's like speaking to like the immigration or whoever, and the one guy doesn't speak English, right? So there's 2 of them. One speaks Italian, the other one speaks both Italian and English. And he's the one that speaks English is talking to her because she's trying to learn Italian. She's not really doing very well, so she can't speak any Italian yet. And this guy is saying, oh, so, like you're choosing to go to this convent, you're taking your vows, blah, 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 blah. And there's a moment where the one who only speaks Italian says, what a shame, in the subtitles, like, what a shame, look at her. And that is intentionally putting into the audience's mind of like, okay, think about her sexuality, think about how she's been looked at and treated by the men that are around her. The movie wants you to think about that as she's going into the convent. Like that was clearly like a signpost at the start of like, hey, think about this as you're watching the rest of the movie. Think about these themes because that's what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. That's what the rest of the movie in large part is about. This idea that these strangers, like, even though they don't do anything, obviously, but this idea that, oh, it's a shame because, oh, she could be a great little bit of sex, like we could use her for that, right? And then she goes into the convent, and then it turns out this is just another place where men are going to use her for something, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the movie, and I think I think the movie's very solid. Even when I wasn't like necessarily into it yet, it was doing a lot of little smart things to like set up the themes and the story and where it was going. I have very little critiques in that sense. It does clearly signpost, hey, this is what we're talking about. Even the friend she makes, Sister Gwen, who's a bit less religious. She kind of makes it sound like, oh, she was in an abusive relationship and she ended up joining the convent because it just seemed like a place where she could go and not like have to like take her clothes off and not be put up with men. And that's the sad irony of it, is that again it turns out to be men control this place. And the second later on that she speaks out and tries to say something's not right here, you're up to something, she's immediately, punished. And we don't really know for sure till much later, but she's killed for even speaking out and daring to go against the regime. So the movie, it's poking at a lot of big subjects.
I mean, it makes it like an interesting watch that actually has something to say. It's not, just trying to scare you by having like some old woman jump out of the shadows or something. Like, that's what I was kind of worried with at the start, because there's a few jump scare kind of things that they weren't like horribly handled, but it did make me kind of go like, okay, is this the type of movie we're getting? And I think they end up straying away from that. So
there was one or two that were actually pretty good. There's one where like a woman kind of like rises up with a pair of scissors next to her bed when she's sleeping. And I thought that was actually a really cool little visual, and it was played in silence, which made it kind of effective. But there's also other moments, in fact, referring to Sister Gwen, when she is like getting her tongue cut out right behind this closed door. Sydney Sweeney gets up and she goes snooping around. And she goes to this like door outside, and it feels like she looks through the keyhole and she sees that her friend Gwen is having her tongue cut out because she dared to like say anything against the regime and like speak out against it. At the end of this scene, right, and for the record, it doesn't cut away from the tongue getting cut. They show it on camera, which is one of those. That was probably the first moment where I went, "Oh shit, they're just showing that." Okay, I guess the movie's willing to do that. But at the end of this scene, you see Sydney Sweeney backing away from the keyhole, right? And they did the whole thing where they had the tear coming down her eye. She's looking through the keyhole, and it's very cinematic. Almost a little too cliche, if anything, to have the tear through the keyhole. But, it was fine. Like, there was no fault with it. But as she was backing away, I went, there's going to be someone standing behind her. That's what this moment is. That's what the jump's about to be that. And it does happen. There's someone standing behind her. It's not exactly who you think it's going to be. It's not someone who's necessarily dangerous to her, but they still do it. They still do the moment where she's backing away and there's going to be a jump behind her. It is very predictable in that moment, which is not to say the movie as a whole is predictable by any means. It's just there's a couple of little moments like that where you're like, it's a horror movie. It's going to do this in 10 seconds. Count it out. There it is. There's the moment which we all saw coming. So there's a little bit of that sprinkled throughout, which what I agree. In the first half hour when it was doing some of it's almost like the premise of the movie is genuinely quite good and interesting, but they knew that nothing like about it would really start happening until after the pregnancy started, and then there's like things start ramping up. So it almost feels like, to just make the audience know they're in a horror movie, we have to give them these like more generic scares for that first half hour or so that they know they're in a horror movie and they're not sitting going, oh, where's the horror stuff? And I almost think I would have respected them more to be like, no, this is a movie that starts off effectively as a drama, right? Obviously the opening scene does a lot of horror stuff, but we'll talk about that separately because it was his own thing. But once we get to Sydney Sweeney's character and it's just introducing her into the movie, if they had just played that first half hour just kind of straight without any a creepy person in a hood standing in the background, or there's one of the old women who's a bit senile is like creeping about in the dark and giving you a jump scare, if they'd maybe just calmed that down and just played it a bit more straight, I think it would have made the stuff that happens after even more of a fun swerve, like even more of things are ramping up now. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too, because like there's even a part where like they're kind of having like a dream sequence, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, here we go with the dream sequence. But then once you kind of find out later, I was like, oh wait, that was actually probably like really happening.
Well, I don't know if like the visual of it was happening, but I assume that was happening when they were doing the operation,
fertilization,
or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So I was like at first I was like, oh, okay, like dream sequence, but then later on I was like, oh, okay, well it actually seemed like there's more of a point to it.
Yeah. It was symbolic at the very least of like when this happened, when they put this in there, because obviously as we're alluding to here, we've not said it yet, it's not actually immaculate. Right? It did not just happen in the spur of the moment. They all act
that's a good
like
point.
That.
I didn't think about sorry. Yeah, no, actually, I didn't think about that. Would that negate it being like immaculate if it's like, okay, yeah, like you didn't have sex or whatever, but it's like you're still using science and stuff too. It's not like a miracle from God.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not immaculate at all. Yeah. It's artificial insemination. That's just I mean, well, even if you can call it that, because this is more like I mean, maybe it's still called that, but this is more like when like a couple can't have kids, so they like have a surrogate mother, but they still use the embryo, I think, from the mother who's going to look after the baby or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out my ass here, but
I think that's right. But I mean, obviously, yeah, we're not experts.
Yeah, by no means. But certainly it's not just her thing, though, her egg, because it's a clone. It's a clone of Christ. Why is it a clone of Christ? And that's honestly, when it started getting into the more mad science stuff, that's when I was like, oh, I'm starting to perk up, because this is a bit more interesting and crazy, and we're getting away from it's just like a satanic cult or something in the church that's secretly there. Like this became a bit more interesting to me at that point.
No. Were you mad that you didn't do this on Ace?
No. No. Well, it's definitely more of a horror movie, regardless of anything. But
do you think that it was a good move that they didn't go with the original title, Attack of the Jesus Clone?
Probably, yeah. I think they wanted it to be a surprise, Tim, so I don't think they wanted to like put it in the title. Because that's the thing, right? So this whole idea that like they're saying it's a miracle, and all of the other nuns are all like treating her like royalty. Like they put her in a nice like gown. They treat her like, you don't do any of the work anymore. You just like you sit. We will give you a tray of breakfast. We'll look after you. We'll pamper you. We'll do all these things for you. So this idea that it is like, when the church claims, like, or not the church, I shouldn't say the church, but like in days gone by, when someone claims something is a miracle, but they've actually engineered it, and it's all just sort of designed to like convince everyone else to conceal what the lie actually is. This felt very kind of like emblematic of that. This felt like a representation of that. The closest thing to maybe like compare it to, I guess, is the Salem witch trials of like someone just like, she's a witch, so we'll have to burn her. This is kind of not exactly the same as that, but in that kind of same vein of like, like another story is that some like intelligent people back when would use solar eclipses to like prove to people that like, oh hey, like God is angry because you're not living how you should. He's going to take out the sky. Oh, and it happened. That was a warning. So now you'll all listen to us. And it's just because they were smart enough to understand that it was going to happen, they could basically use it, and all the people who didn't know any better would get scared. This kind of feels like that to an extent, where it's like, hey, everyone else who doesn't know that we're secretly doing mad science to like impregnate this woman, it's an immaculate conception, so everyone should be happy because the second coming is upon us.
So this was a really interesting idea that I liked, where I'm sure there are other examples where this kind of thing has been done, but basically you're doing kind of like a trapped or like a hostage kind of movie where this person is like stuck in this place, but often it's like they're being mistreated or kept as like a prisoner in a cage, or it's like you need to escape. But I thought it was like an interesting swerve to be like, oh, she's trapped in this place, but everyone is being so nice to her, like they're treating her like royalty, because it's like, oh my god, like you're the mother of the new savior and stuff. So I thought that was like a pretty interesting idea, that it's like things are actually looking very positive, even though there's this underlying like weirdness and creepiness to it. But people aren't being like mean or wicked, or obviously like there's like the jealous nun and stuff, but like still it's like, oh, like you're being pampered and stuff. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's, if anything, they could have kept that going longer, because obviously at a certain point when she tries to escape, it does turn into more of a just, you're just imprisoned and you can't leave kind of movie at that point. But yeah, for a while, and I think maybe one of the questions I had was how many people at this convent were in the plan or knew about it, because I feel like the whole story of its Immaculate Conception was for the wider group of nuns who all weren't maybe a part of it. But at the same time, like the jealous nun Isabel, it turns out that she did know that they were trying to do this, because she gets like jealous and tries to kill Cindy Sweeney in like the bathtub, because she's like, oh, it was try again with me. It was supposed to be me. And it seemed like she on some level knew that they were trying to do this. I mean, maybe she didn't know about the mad science part, but if she didn't know about the mad science part, then how did she think they were doing it? I guess is my question. Because she says, try again with me, which implies that she knows that someone is actively trying to achieve this at the convent. So, yeah. But, I mean, I think that side of it is still interesting. Seeing how she's treated and how, I think, more interestingly, uncomfortable she seems as she's been treated that way. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's a miracle, it's this, it's that. But I don't think, and this is where I think the good acting, you know, where she's not even saying a word comes in, is, you know, her reaction to the news in the first place is kind of like, wait, what? I'm not ready for this. I definitely did not sign up for it. And then how she's treated by everyone like she's special, and all she is conflicted, and maybe doesn't feel like she can talk about how she actually feels about it. Gives it a bit of depth, gives it a little bit of some layers there.
You know what, in a weird way, it kind of reminds me of is like, I feel like I've had this before at like jobs I've had when, you know, you have to talk to like your manager or something, and you know, they kind of ask that question like, oh, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or like, do you like, you know, would you be interested in like, you know, taking on more like management responsibility or something like that, blah blah blah. And, you know, like most of the time you're supposed to be like, oh yeah, no, like I would love this, you know, this bigger role and stuff. But I'm like always the kind of person like, I just kind of like doing what I'm doing. Like, I just want to kind of be this grunt that's kind of just out of the way and not on people's radar, which I feel like maybe like that's what she kind of wanted. She's like, hey, I signed up to be a nun. I didn't sign up. Like, maybe it's like hard for them to conceive that, oh, someone would actually just want to be kind of like a lowly nun. Like, she just really like, you know, wants that lifestyle, and not, you know, it's like, wait, what do you mean you don't want to be like the new mother of the savior? Like, but yeah, some people just like to do their thing, you know.
I think the reaction from some of these like religious people in this movie, if she admitted or said out loud that she didn't actually want this, I think they would, you know, scoff at her. I think they would, you know, look down on her. They would say, you're ungrateful, this is a miracle, this is that, this is whatever. I think they would be like, they would make her feel guilty for not wanting this. And I think that's also something that ties into this idea of like how people who are like adamantly against abortion try to make anyone feel who does not want to have a child. So it's, yeah, like it's got all that going. I think some of the things we should talk about kind of early on in the movie is some of like her backstory comes up, which is that she survived a near-death experience where she fell into ice when she was younger, and she survived after being technically dead for 7 minutes. So that's kind of what made her a candidate for this. I think they go looking for young women who have been, you know, quote unquote touched by God. She's come here because, like, you know, she was a nun in the US, but like the church closed down because it's you know, the attendance wasn't great or whatever. So she's like come here now in hopes of finding a more purposeful, you know, use of her I don't know, her dedication, I guess. I was gonna say it feels weird to say talents because it's not like talents per se, but yeah.
I thought it was interesting too, like when she was talking to her friend about that, like she say something like, oh yeah, like the church closed down. She's like, oh, was there like a scandal or something? Like,
that was her first thought. Yeah. The
like,
priest did something bad.
Yeah. It's just like funny to like hear like, oh, like even like a nun thinking like that's their first thought.
Well, I think that's the first time we get from her specifically that she doesn't just like think like all the other nuns do. She is questioning things. She kind of represents someone who's a bit more I don't know if I want to say progressive per se, but just this idea that she, like later on when she does start to like question things and she starts like, you know, yelling out at the father and the others and saying, what the F is going on here? This isn't right. Something's happening. You know, because by that point in the movie, one of the other moments that kind of stuck out about halfway through was the jealous nun, Isabel, after the attempted murder of Sydney Sweeney's character. Sydney Sweeney's like walking down like the sort of courtyard area, and then you just see the body fall in the background, and she's seemingly committed suicide. I say seemingly because I'm pretty sure that someone pushed her.
Yeah.
It seems like, oh, you try to endanger the mother of our second coming, you can't live, so you're dead, kind of thing.
And talk about a nice little bit of gore, like when they, turn over her body, her face is just so like wretched.
Yeah,
it looked really good.
I was wondering if that was implying that her face had already been like mutilated before they threw her off. Like maybe they tortured her a little bit before that, and it was like, oh, this, as long as she lands on her face, this will cover up anything we did.
Possibly, yeah.
But I think, yeah, like obviously it's going to ruffle some feathers because the whole, like, this movie never turns out to be, oh, it's a secret satanic cult with inside the church is doing bad things. It's just, no, this is just people of the church who believe this is the right thing to do, and they will force this woman to give birth to their second coming no matter what, and they will kill anyone who gets in the way. It's like being, and let's face it, I mean, I don't know a whole lot of the history that comes with this, but I've certainly heard stories here or there of like how violent like religious wars used to be and all the things done in the name of the church in various ways. So
yeah, no, I do appreciate that it really doesn't pull any punches in labeling the church as the bad guy in this. And again, I just feel like it's something we see so often with religious horror where it's like, oh yeah, like, you can overcome your demons if you're just like a good Christian person who believes in Jesus and stuff, and the church always helps fight the demons, and which sometimes can make like can seem cool in a movie, but then I don't know, it always seems a bit iffy when you think about like some of the things that have happened in the church's name and in real life and whatever. So not to get too political or whatever, but it's cool to see a very like hard stance that the movie's taking, where it's like, no, they're like the bad guys. They're the ones that are wrong here.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, of course, what you just said there, like that only applies normally because it's a demon movie or something supernatural that's satanic, and that the church is what can combat it. Whereas here, the entire threat is created by people from within the church, and that's why at least that group inside the church are the villains. Which, yeah, like so there's a tease early on where the priest says, oh, I used to be a biologist, and that's kind of like your little tease of where it's going. But yeah, when he eventually shows her like the lab and like all these failed embryos like out at Alien Resurrection, and he reveals that nail that they've got that's from the crucifixion, like that has like dried up Jesus blood on it, and I've spent 20 years of my life trying to perfect the cloning process.
I can't remember what it is, but I feel like there's been something else that has tried to do something like with this idea of like cloning Jesus, and I can't remember if it was like another horror movie or like a comic book I read. Like obviously, like very different like stories. Like it's not about a nun them forcing her to have a baby and stuff. But I feel like that there had been something else that was like, oh yeah, we found like some Jesus blood on the nail and wanted to clone him or do something with him.
Nothing sprang to mind. I'm sure it does exist. I'm sure it's not the first time the ideas came up, but I could not tell you, Tim.
Yeah. If anyone can think of what I'm thinking about in the comments, let me know. Or I mean, maybe there's multiple things like that, but it didn't make it seem like the movie wasn't fresh or anything. Like I still think it's a pretty novel idea, but I kept racking my brain trying to think like I feel like I've seen this somewhere.
Well, no, but even if that core idea's been used somewhere, like the presentation of this and like this, the scenario we're in to begin with, and then what it turns out they're doing, I'm just thinking of like how did they do this? Did they have the turkey paster from
I was
from Don't
I was
Breathe?
Thinking about that.
Is that how they did this?
I was gonna make a joke at some point. It's gonna be like like when she's having that dream sequence or something. They're like, oh yeah, then you just see the Don't Breathe, the guy with the turkey baster.
So the power of Christ is compelling you. So after she sees her friend's tongue be cut off, that's when she's starting to get suspicious and sort of look around, and she sees that, and of course that's a very extreme thing she sees. She knows now that she's in some sort of danger and that she really should try and get out of here. And when she does bring up in one of the medical checkups, oh, I would really like to see another doctor and be in a hospital. I'm pregnant, you know, I'm in my second trimester. We should go do this, blah, 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 blah. And they just sort of like gaslight her and say, oh no, this doctor's like, you know, he's got a license. He delivers babies like, you know, 4 days out of the week. You don't have to go anywhere. You're safer here. Like if anyone else finds out what you're carrying, like you could be in great danger. So you're better off here. So her big plan to try and get out halfway through the movie is to fake a miscarriage so that they are forced to take her to the hospital when the doctor's not around. So she starts screaming, you know, people come in and find her, and there's blood all over the bed. She's screaming in pain, and he's reluctant, but ultimately the priest decides to take her, puts her in the car, and drives her out of the convent. Yes, Tim?
One little nitpick here, and maybe there's something in Italy where like people don't work on Saturdays or whatever, but they kept saying like, oh, it's Saturday, like we won't be able to reach the doctor, like we're not going to be able to get a hold of him. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe like in normal circumstances, like your doctor doesn't want you to contact you on that day or whatever, but I feel like under the circumstances where it's like we have this big crazy secret Jesus clone operation going on that, you know, the doctor, like he must be in on it because like, you know, that he's
obviously
around there. Yeah, so it's like really like he's not going to be on call, like, well, not considering the circumstances.
Not to be fair, Tim, it goes back to that scene that I just brought up. He did say specifically that 4 or 5 days out of the week he's working at a hospital delivering babies. I think the idea is that the days he's here,
he's at the hospital.
He's here, but I think on these days where he's not at the convent, he's at a full-time gig somewhere else, and presumably his time here is either off the books or maybe it's, you know, whatever, but like maybe it's just as simple as, oh, if we call him to come in, he might, you know, maybe depending on where the hospital is, maybe he's like 3 hours away, 4 hours away, and you know, the nearest hospital's, you know, however far away it is. I don't know. So I don't think that I don't think that's a big deal. I think they specifically set up that there's days where he's just not here. He's working full time elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a very small thing. Like, it's not like I was like, oh my god, like this ruins the movie or anything. It was just kind of like stood out to me, being like, really, like you're not gonna be able to get a hold of him at all. Like, all right. Yeah,
she gets driven out of the ground. She's in the car. She's screaming in pain the entire way. But then the reveal is that the woman left behind, who I think is the Mother Superior, although she wasn't wearing her full outfit, so it was hard to, like, I recognized her based on the nun outfit she was wearing, not really based on anything else.
Yeah.
But she's like praying at the bedside, and she's like, you know, she basically like rubs the bloody sheets in her face. I thought she was going to like taste it and realize it wasn't blood, and I thought, oh, it's going to be somehow she's used something to fake blood. But what she actually finds is that underneath the bed there is a dead chicken, which is a callback to earlier in the movie where during the training montage where it's like, hey, this is all your duties on the convent, and she's like looking after the old people, she's doing the laundry, whatever. One of the things they were being shown how to do was how to kill the chickens for, you know, dinner, basically. Then so it was a whole thing where it's like, oh, I can't do that. Which is kind of the arc for the movie almost, is that she can't kill the chicken early on. But not only does she do it here so she can get all the blood from it, she also, by the end of the movie, is going to start killing people left and right to save herself.
She can't stop killing at some point.
Which I do think is an arc. I think the whole point is that by the end of the movie, she's willing to fight for herself. Like, she's willing to do whatever it takes to not be beat down by this system that she's been like sort of held captive by, and that's what makes the ending kind of like empowering in a sense, is she's able to fight out of it. So, like, you know, it's a big part of it.
Yeah, I like the scene too where like, they're driving in the car and you kind of slowly, like, the priest or whatever that's driving, or not the one that's driving, but like he gets a call from the nun back there, and just kind of the way they deliver, like, you know, that them kind of slowing down and getting real quiet, and then you can kind of see the look on, you know, Sydney Sweeney's face, being like, what, like, what's wrong, like, what, like, where are we going, like, you know. I thought that was like, I guess I just like the way that was handled.
Yeah, and then she makes a run for it. She just dives out of the car and she tries to run, and it's a really good shot because she's wearing this like white, you know, gown, you know, like a sleeping not pajamas. What do you call it? Yeah, just a gown, I guess.
Nightgown, yeah.
And she's running through a field trying to get away desperately, but because this gown is white, but she's covered half of it in this chicken blood, the visual's quite insane because you've got all this, red mixed with it, and red obviously pops really hard when it's on white, right? It's why wrestlers, whenever they know they're going to bleed in a match, always wear white because they know the blood will look especially horrific during it.
Oh, cool.
But they catch up to her and take her back, and she's basically chastised as they like wash her down in the shower. It's very dehumanizing. It's like, you don't have any rights. You have to deliver this baby. That is your purpose. That's all your purpose is. And that's when he takes her to the mad science lab and shows her all the embryos and all that, and then brands her feet with a cross so that she can't run as easily anymore, and as a punishment for trying to get away. So at this point, like, all like pretending to be nice, like we care about you, is all gone. As soon as she's tried to rebel and not give them and fit into their system exactly how they want her to, that's it. We're putting our foot down, and you'll know your place. That is the turn of events here at this part of the movie. From there, it jumps ahead in time again to the third trimester, pretty much after this. There's a great little scene. I don't know if it's before the time jump or not, where she's in like confession for real this time, because the first time she's in confession, it's the dream sequence where the priest just doesn't respond to her, and the confession booth keeps getting longer and longer. But the second time when it's real confession and the priest is like asking her to say stuff, she, and this is not the main priest that's been talking to her. This is the older one, the more bishop-looking dude that's sort of in charge of the whole place. Like, because clearly he's the one in charge of the convent, and then like Father Tedeschi's more like the scientist who's directly interacting with Sydney Sweeney the whole movie. But he's basically talking to her about whatever, and she says, "Hey, this isn't God's plan to like force me to do this. This is horrific." I can't remember the exact line of dialogue, but she says something like that. And the priest responds to her with, "If it's not God's plan, then why hasn't he stopped us?" And I thought, that is such a convenient sentence for anyone who's doing anything in the name of God that's horrible or evil or bad, and to justify it saying, well, he'd be stopping us. He'd be stopping us if this was not what he wanted, so here we go. So she's at this point, she's pulled off one of her nails, she's vomited up a tooth.
I forgot about that stuff. Yeah,
all this stuff's just kind of peppered through it. Some of that was earlier. The nail thing's here though, because she pulls it off during the confession scene. But yeah, so lots of little gross out little moments of just how horrific all this is.
Yeah, the tooth thing I kind of understood, because like I was like, okay, maybe if you're having a lot of morning sickness, like that can like kind of weaken your teeth and stuff. But I wasn't sure if there's a specific reason why the nail came off, or if it was, I don't know, just, body horror stuff.
I think she was, I think it just shows that she's been either clawing at something. My first instinct was that, did I miss her getting her hand like slammed in something, and that's like damaged her nail, and it's been slowly coming off since then, but I don't remember anything like that, so I don't know.
Yeah. Or I don't know if it's maybe there's just a little thing that's trying to say like, oh, there's something wrong with this pregnancy. Like, it's not, normal. It's hurting her.
I think if nothing else, it's just showing like just how it's affecting her. The mental space she's in right now is horrific. And like, she's just, picking at things like that because it's all she can do. She's literally confined to a bed or a wheelchair, and like, they're not letting her do anything. She is just a complete prisoner by this point in the movie, and it's not until things ramp up quite quickly here, because once we've time jumped into the third trimester, and she's like lying in bed, the Mother Superior is like finishing up her nightly routine or whatever it is. She basically just grabs this cross that's on the nightstand and slams it into the back of Mother Superior. I almost said Mother Teresa there. Mother Superior's head. And she doesn't die immediately. She sort of turns and looks at her like, what the hell? And then she hits her again. So she beats her to death. And it's like she's got the fight now to try and live. And honestly, Joe's so weird is that this movie has a really funny moment right after this, which I didn't see coming, because I wouldn't really say the movie has much humor in it. There's like one line from a friend character earlier on where she says, the bitchy nun, or her vibrator must be out of batteries. And that was like kind of amusing because it was like, it stood out against anything else that was being said. But after she's killed Mother Superior and maybe grabs some keys or whatever, and she like walks out of the room, and keeping this, at this point she's 9 months pregnant. So she goes to the door and she's sneaking around, and right then her water breaks. And her reaction to it, where she looks down and says, "God damn it," made me laugh. That was really funny.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, like I almost wonder if just a bit more of that like dark humor sprinkled in here. Admittedly, part of it, the reason why it was funny is because there'd been nothing really funny up until that point. So it really popped me when she said that. But then she goes and kills the main priest in charge. Like, he's watching the nun sing at his balcony, and she just sneaks up behind him and strangles him with the rosary beads that she was given during her vows. And at this point, I'm like, oh man, is the end of it? Is the third act of this movie going to be a like crazy pregnant woman going around killing people in this convent? But we're rooting for her because they're evil. Because that sounds badass. If anything, I'm a little disappointed that other than the other one main character she has to deal with, who's like, Father Tedeschi, who kind of becomes the main villain of the movie, I was kind of hoping for a bit more carnage, because there's something really wild about a fully pregnant woman who, not only just fully pregnant, her water has broke. So in theory, she's in labor as she's going around.
That feels people. like such a exploitation grindhouse kind of movie, just like, yeah, she's pregnant and she's pissed, but yeah, and for as much as it lasts, this stuff is pretty fun. It's cool to see her getting her revenge. She
strangles him. She's beat the Mother Superior to death. I like how all the methods of death are all different as well, because not the death per se, because she goes down to the scientist lab, the mad science lab with all the embryos and stuff, and starts dousing it in gasoline. Actually, I think it was ethanol specifically, but whatever, the flammable liquid, and she's just pouring it everywhere. And Father Tedeschi shows up and is like, "What you're doing will not help." And then she whips out the lighter, which she stole from the previous guy she murdered, and is like, makes it very clear with her eyes, like she is going to burn all this to the ground, and including herself. Like, if this means killing herself so that they just don't get what they want from her, like, that's worth it, almost. He ends up fighting her. They have a bit of a struggle, and she kind of is trying to hold out of the lighter. She eventually gets out of the room and slams the door shut, so he's trapped inside, and the gasoline's like pouring out from under the door. So she basically like eventually drops the lighter and sets him on fire. You see him like burst into flames behind the door. I actually really liked how this was handled though, because after like he goes away from the door, so you don't see him anymore. You just see like flames and stuff. But after about like a minute, you hear a fire extinguisher from inside the room, so you know that he survived and that he's going to be coming out. And you're like, oh shit! I thought that was a really good suspenseful like reveal of like just that sound of the fire extinguisher told you so much, and it's like, oh shit, we have to get going. So off we go down to the catacombs, which were mentioned at the start of the movie.
Oh, that's right.
But not much. I'd forgotten about them though by the time that she actually went down there, because it's not like they kept saying like, oh, you can never go down to the catacombs. It's not like they were saying that every 10 minutes. It was like one mention, like super early on.
Yeah, I do think the movie does like respect the viewer, where like it's not really like holding your hand and spoon feeding you stuff.
Sure,
like it's like, no, like like the fire extinguisher thing is a great example of just being like, yeah, we don't have to show him like grabbing it on the wall and putting the flames out, like just with the sound, like what's happening.
Yeah, for sure. I think it doesn't spell anything out. I do think it maybe is a little bit, like I said, like all the little generic horror things in the first half hour, just to sort of like give the audience something exciting. I do think that's a lack of trust in the audience, that we have to like make it more generically entertaining for a bit until we get to the good stuff. In fact, my best example of that, just to go back and talk about this now, is the opening scene. I forgot about that. I don't think the opening scene should be there. They do this scene where the previous nun who was there tries to run away and seemingly gets buried alive by like the hooded nuns that are all wearing masks. And I just, and I mean, at the time I didn't really think too much of it. I just thought, okay, it's setting stuff up. But looking back on it now, I'm like, you know what? I think just starting the movie straight with Sydney Sweeney's character and just building up slowly, because if anything, that would make it feel even more like a 70s like exploitation movie.
Absolutely.
It's just start with her story and just go from there. It felt like, oh, it's a while before we get to the good stuff, so we have to give them this big horror scene at the start so the audience like feels like they're in the mood for it. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you needed it.
Yeah, the hooded nuns just feel like they're trying too hard to be creepy.
The nuns with the mask, because I at first I thought they looked like druids, because like from the distance that's what they look like. But I agree. It feels like this is their attempt to give you something to, even though they're not on the poster, it feels like something you could put on the poster, and this is their attempt to have an iconic look. But they're not even the, like, I mean, obviously there's some evil nuns here because they have to be the ones wearing these outfits, but for the most part, it's the two men and the Mother Superior who are the villains, right? And maybe the Doctor as well at a stretch. He didn't get he didn't get killed at the end.
Yeah, it feels like, you know, you're kind of talking before, like, oh, you like that the movie doesn't end up being like some secret satanic cult in the middle of the church or whatever, but like these hooded nuns, like that's what it kind of makes you feel like that's what's gonna happen. Like, oh yeah, they're part of some like secret ancient sect that dresses up and does this shady shit. So yeah, it's, I don't know, it's just not really needed.
Yeah, like you said, I think you put it best when you said it's like they're trying too hard to do like a really generic like horror thing when the movie doesn't really need it, because its core idea and where it's going is more interesting than that. And the more it becomes what it's becoming, the I think the better it is. So yeah, they end up chasing each other around the catacombs a bit. He eventually catches up to her. She actually had the nail of Christ on her persons, and that's actually how he ends up dying. He's all burned at this point as well, but she stabs him in the neck, and blood sprays all over her face and like, or, you know, her clothes. And she crawls out to sunlight because she's actually almost out. Like she finds like a hole out to sunlight just as he grabs her from behind. And like, I mean, his death's fine. I don't have. It's not as. I think by the time this confrontation happened, I wasn't as excited as I was in the other two deaths, because by this point, like, we'd already done those two, and I realized, oh, this is probably the last one, rather than like a full on rampage. However, the best part of the movie is what comes after, right? The end of the movie is like, they had this idea and they went there. She crawls out to the outside and it's just nothing but fields and whatnot. And she starts to feel pain. And there's an intentional choice here. I think this is all done in one shot, right? If there was a cut, I forget it and I'd maybe look at it again. But if there is a cut, then it's not that many shots, certainly. But I think it was all in one shot. Is that once she starts giving birth, we stay in a close-up of her face the entire time, right? And she's standing there. You hear the plop, I suppose I'll call it, of the baby being born and hitting the ground. And then we stay in her face the entire time as she walks over to a rock, picks up the rock, walks back over, and the movie ends with her slamming the rock down. But this is not to gloss over like her screaming in pain as she's giving birth, which really sold that moment. And like, not only that, the visual of her face being covered in blood as she's screaming in pain is, you know, striking, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's super effective, and yeah, it's just very well done. The way it just really makes you like stay with her, and yeah, you can feel the pain, and then like she has to like chew off the umbilical cord.
I forgot about that. That was gross. That may have been the grossest thing in the movie, to be honest.
And then you only get like the tiniest little glimpse of the baby, like you just kind of see.
Is that a focus?
Yeah. And then and part of me, you know, was kind of thinking like, all right, are they gonna show it and it's gonna have like little devil horns or something? Like it's gonna be like, oh, it was a demon or something, you know what I mean? But I think they made all the right calls where it's like, oh no, like it's not about that. Like it's, you know, it's not about like what the baby is, it's about her choice.
Because I was thinking like like not halfway, maybe 2/3 out of the movie or something. Once the premise was set up and we knew she was pregnant and whatnot, I was thinking at one point, like, well, how is this movie going to end? Because like if she gives birth to this baby and let's say she gets away from all these evil people and whatnot, is she going to like feel attached to the baby because she's given birth to it? Is it going to like do some sort of thing like that? So I actually really appreciated the balls of the end of this movie being her saying, no, I'm going to kill this thing because it is not my child. I did not choose this. It's gone.
Oh yeah. I think almost any other movie would have made that choice where it's like, all right, screw them for doing this to me, but you know what? The baby's born. I'm looking at it. I'm bonding. I'm its mother. You know, like I'll raise it my way or whatever. You know, I think that is what most movies would have done. But yeah, this made such a much more interesting and ballsy choice that it's great.
Yeah, I really like the ending. I think everything about and the way it's captured in that one shot, or very few shots if it is more than one, but just staying on her face. It pulls back a little bit when she's getting the rock, and that's where you see the out of focus baby on the ground in the background. But it's very blurry, you know, so you can sort of tell it's covered in blood, but you can't really see much else. You can just hear some noises, and that's about it. Yeah. Like, I think the way it's captured and the choice here, all the choices were made, gave this last 3 minutes added so much personality to this movie. Like, don't get me wrong, absolutely. As soon as she started killing people and even cracked that joke where she said, God damn it, like she's lost her faith in God at this point, or whatever, like, that was where it started to feel like it had proper personality. But once it got to this moment, I'm like, okay, you don't just have a good idea, you don't just have something to say, you've actually got, like, personality now. And I think I would have loved if I felt that throughout more of the movie. Like, that's the one thing, is I'd say that it does feel really, really, like, I'm curious to watch it again at some point, because I wonder how I'm going to feel knowing exactly where it's going at the end, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting how it goes, because I feel like the first, you know, third of the movie or so, I'm just kind of like, no, okay, like, let's see where this is going. Like, it hasn't really wowed me. I'm kind of dubious based on some of the more typical horror tropes, and then the middle actually gets really interesting, where I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't expecting this. Yeah, I'm intrigued now. Let's see where it's going. And then, like the last, final act, the last third or whatever, it feels like a big shift, but it is like pretty fun and entertaining. So it's, I don't know, it's very interesting the way the movie progresses. Yeah,
the more exploitation it got, the more I was into it. But it absolutely is a thing, though, is that admittedly most people might go in knowing what the basic premise is with the conception, but that's definitely where the movie feels like it has like a direction now. Like, okay, I can see that it has like a defined place to go. And I think before that point, it just feels like too much of a generic horror movie. Even though it's mostly well done, these scares feel just kind of there so we can have scares. And I don't know what the trajectory of the movie is at this point, other than just she's going to eventually realize that some of these people are bad. Once the pregnancy comes in, it's like, oh no, this movie has like a defined point that it's working towards now. It's like, okay, this is what this movie's about. This is where we're going. So it definitely helped the pacing and the momentum immediately as soon as that came into it. Because it's like, okay, now it's about something. Now I can see what the concept is, as opposed to just, I'm waiting for more generic spooky shit to happen until, you know, we get to somewhere where it can be revealed. So yeah. So yeah, it's not bad by any means. It's got some good stuff in here.
Yeah, again, I did enjoy it. And I actually had fun talking about it. Which, I mean, you know, I always enjoy our little. I was going to say, Tim, don't you normally enjoy talking about things here? No, I think it is an interesting movie to discuss, and like, I don't know, that this was a good talk.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. I mean, it does feel like it has a lot to say, you know, in a broad sense about you know, the right to choose, and the idea of like the powers that be, that being men typically, having so much say and control over what women can do with their body, and then to try and like relate that to the Virgin Mary and say, hey, was she strapped down because she didn't want it, kind of thing, or is that just something that's happening now because this character who's in 2024, at least I think it's 2024. Yeah, it must be, because they've got, like, at least the priest had a mobile phone at the very least, so it's not too far back if it isn't present day. You know, she like has a different reaction to it, but it does. That's what it was making me think at the end. It was like, yeah, have we ever stopped and thought about how Mary felt about all that in the context of the story of the path to Jesus? You know, all the stories say, oh, you know, it was this great miracle and it was all this great thing that happened, but I can just envision a woman screaming and being horrified that this has happened to her.
It's also like, man, you don't even get like the most fun part about getting pregnant.
I think it's an interesting film. I'm sure there's probably someone could really dissect it even more than I think we have, and talk about kind of the feminist side of its themes.
Oh, sure.
But it absolutely is in there. And once it starts digging into that stuff, it's definitely a bit more interesting. I think maybe something else that would have helped a little bit is that, while I said that the first half hour is the slowest and least interesting because it feels a bit more generic, perhaps developing the relationship between Sweeney's character and Sister Gwen, her friend, would have maybe went a little bit, because I feel like Sister Gwen should be like a likable character because she's the one who is like calling out the bullshit, and therefore that's instantly a bit likable. But I feel like there's just not quite enough of it, or enough of her, or even just like, I don't know, like when this all happens, right, and Sydney Sweeney's character gets pregnant, she seems like she's not like that thrilled by it either, and it might have been nice to explore what she thinks about it a bit more, and maybe like set her up, and I might have cared like that they were torturing her more as a result, because it should have been more fleshed out character. So maybe some characters could have been a little bit fleshed out. Maybe they wanted to keep the runtime short and that's why they're not, or maybe I don't know, like I don't know what led to that decision, but
no, I mean, yeah, there's something there. I mean, yeah, I feel like I don't say that often, but it's like, yeah, maybe it could have been a little longer. Yeah, it's nice to have that complaint more than, you know, being like, oh, why is this movie 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I would have liked a bit more after we start the pregnancy, because then we get to hear more from like that friendship about like how she feels about it, why she's conflicted, why she doesn't seem, because there's that scene where Sydney Sweeney comes in for breakfast and all the nuns stand up because it's a big deal she's here because she's the new Mother Mary, blah blah blah. But notably, Sister Gwen, the friendly one, isn't standing up. She's stayed seated. It kind of shows that she's not, at the very least, like buying into this as some great thing. It would have been nice to get a bit more from her, just on how she feels about it, what she thinks is happening, and so that. But there is that great line as she's been like carried away later when she starts like yelling to everyone about what's going on. She says to Father Tedeschi something, and Father Tedeschi gives the gaslighting answer about why why Sydney Sweeney should stay here and not go to a hospital, and immediately Sister Gwen says, "Bullshit! I know when a man's lying." And he doesn't really have an answer for it. And the answer, well, he does have an answer. The answer is to cart her away and get rid of her because she's questioning things in front of people. The conspiracy side of everything. So it definitely got a lot more interesting once we started to hit those kind of points.
Yeah. I feel like they just ended up killing her. So it's like, well, but did you really need to like torture her and cut off her tongue? Like, if you're just gonna kill her anyway, like just kill her. Like,
I mean, I guess it makes us hate them more. They're assholes. Like they're not just corrupt villains. Like they're spiteful, corrupt villains.
Yeah.
at that, trying to, keep their power. And
yeah, because I expected like she was gonna show back up, but she's gonna be like, oh, I can't say anything. My tongue's cut off.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of expecting that as well. But she could probably still write things down unless they also cut off her hands or something.
Yeah, it would have been pretty dumb on their part.
yeah, I think it was just a spiteful thing. It's symbolic, like, hey, you were saying things you shouldn't, so we're going to cut off your tongue before we kill you. But I think it was more just about the torture of it beforehand, rather than whatever. Like, so yeah, Yeah, there's definitely some things that could have been fleshed out a little bit, and I think it would have maybe helped. But I do appreciate that it is a lean runtime and that it really does go places by the end. So, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I was rooting for like a woman in labor for the entire third act, going around being violent. You know, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
So yeah, okay. I mean, the answer here is probably obvious given everything. But what was the scene of the movie, Tim?
I mean, absolutely. It's, you know, the last like 3 or however long minutes. I mean, it's just it's so visually striking, and just the idea for the scene itself is, again, it's like a very ballsy take. So like you applaud it for that, but then also, yeah, to do it like all done in this, you know, one shot close up of her face, like, you know, it was all really smart decisions to lead to something very memorable. And I feel like, you know, if anything else, you know, it's gonna stick with you after watching the movie.
Yeah, no, I need to pick the same things. The last 3 minutes, you know, that ending, the giving birth, the close up on her face during that, to the kind of the awkwardness of like the silence as she walks over to get the rock, and then the final sort of, you know, thrust. Yeah, it's all just perfect, pretty much, and it elevates the movie considerably as well. This is probably also obvious, unless you've got a weird take. MVP of the movie.
I mean, yeah, it's obviously Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, there's no other answer, really.
Yeah, I don't think, like, you know, I think everyone in the movie is pretty good, but it's just such a one-hander. You know, it's so much her story, her focus. It'd be hard to choose anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's nothing to add to that, really. So, with that said, Tim, what are you rating Immaculate?
Yeah, again, I think it's good, but it's just not quite there to being great. But I don't know. You talk about rewatching it. I don't know. Like, I'm not in a rush. You know, we have so much other stuff to watch, but I could see myself, like, you know, throwing this on maybe somewhere down the line, and maybe knowing where it goes and seeing some of the setup, maybe it will play a little better. But it is a shame that there was some little stuff, mostly just kind of talking about like how, yeah, the beginning, like it seems like maybe it's going to be a little more tropey or something. But yeah, the rest of the movie more than makes up for it. So I'm still going to give it a pretty good score. I think I'm going to give it a 7, which I think is, yeah, it's good. It's definitely worth a watch. Has a lot of interesting things to say, a few stuff that's kind of uneven, but when it does hit pretty well. And then, you know, the ending, again, just very memorable, worth watching for that. But yeah, just kind of shy of like, you know, maybe being like great, but still, I was happy to finally see it and talk about it.
I think if I can critique you for a second, Tim, bear with me. You've got a knack for like coming in and sounding negative because you focus on the negative aspect first, but we're actually rating at the same score. And I think the only difference is that you came in with this kind of like, you went through the lens of the disappointment that it wasn't amazing, as opposed to saying, no, it's good, it's uneven, it's not perfect, it's not, you know, it's got its faults, but it's good.
Yeah,
like I mean, we watch a lot worse than this, Tim. Let's be honest here.
Absolutely. This is on the higher end for stuff. I think it's the problem. I find a lot of the times, and I blame just the internet. It's just everything is either a 1 or a 10. So I always try to, you know, like people just get so excited about stuff, and it's like, oh, it's amazing, it's the best movie ever, blah, blah, blah. And then I always feel like, oh, you know, if you say that it's just fine or just good, it sounds like you hated the movie or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe I feel too self-conscious.
Yeah, I'm just saying, let yourself be free. Like, you know, I think you can show a bit of enthusiasm for a 7, especially when we do a show where I feel like the average score is like a 5 or less. I feel like you could absolutely say, hey, no, 7 is good. It's not perfect. There's you know, and I think with this movie in particular, I would agree that there's an uneven quality to parts of it, and I think all of the sort of like generic attempts at horror movie scenes in the first half hour I could have done without. I just think all they did was set me up for a movie that I wasn't going to like, and then the movie actually got into its premise and it was far more interesting. So that would be my main critique, but I'm also giving it a 7. I think it's a good movie. Without the last act, like, it probably wouldn't have got a 7 from me, but between her starting to kill people and then especially that last few minutes, it definitely pushed it up and made it an interesting movie that I think is worth recommending now. So
I feel positively about it, but then I'm just when I think of like some people that are like, oh, like, you didn't think it was like the most amazing thing, or you're not hyping it up enough, and I don't know.
Screw them.
Also, sometimes I don't.
We used the whole scale, Tim. We used the whole scale. There's amazing, and there's terrible, and there's everything in between. And we can, just believe in yourself.
Yeah. I also sometimes I don't even. Some movies I do, some movies I don't. Sometimes I don't always know exactly where I'm going to land score wise. So sometimes it's through the talking about it that I'm like, actually, maybe I did like this a little bit more now that I'm talking about it, or sometimes the opposite. Like, actually, maybe I liked it less. So you never know.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. That is Immaculate. And would you believe it, everyone? This is the final episode of Screams After Midnight before...
Ever.
Very good. Before the Octoberthon. So just next week, we will be kicking off Octoberthon 2024 with 3 or 4 episodes every week for the duration of the month. There'll be 3 exclusive episodes on Patreon as opposed to 1. It's one of the things that I always promote here, is that you get exclusive episodes, usually once per month, but in October you get some extras. Plus you get even more stream segments on Patreon or via YouTube membership. So, we've done top 5s, things like that. By the time this goes out, we did like an even more streams episode on the idea of like banishing things from horror movies that we don't like away forever, based on an old British TV show called Room 101. And we both came in with a list of things we never want to see again, and had a good old cathartic moan about terrible things. So
that's true.
If that sounds like fun, that plus just random top 5, top 10s, that's the sort of thing we do on Even More Streams. But you can get that in the bonus episodes over on Patreon or via YouTube membership. So any support of any kind, though, it's how the show can keep coming, how it still exists after almost 600 episodes. In fact, the second episode of the Octoberthon is episode 600. So, yeah, we're bubbling up to it. Very dangerously close. So, hopefully you have fun for October. Yeah, you're excited about it, and you join us for the plethora of episodes. And the one thing I will promote in terms of movies, I will say that we're going to review the entire Omen franchise throughout October. We've already recorded a bunch of them, but that's all 6 of them, including this year's prequel that came out, which neither of us have seen yet. So that'll be like a new thing to get to at the end of it.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of comparisons between that and Immaculate, so it'll be interesting to see how they, cross each other's paths.
Yeah. Oh, maybe we'll have
it seemed like I've seen like some people be like, oh, like, are you team Immaculate or team First Omen? Like, seems like people are like choosing sides, like which was the one that they dug.
Well, I mean, maybe we'll have some comparisons to make when we get there. But yeah, that is the show, everyone. That has been Streams After Midnight. So hopefully you've had a good time with us, and we'll see you throughout spooky season in October. Not that we're taking any time off after that. There'll be November episodes too, but October's a big reason to get into the horror mood, so plenty to talk about. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.